Hello and welcome to 3D modeling tutorial number 95. In this tutorial I'll show you how we can bake an ambient occlusion map. So first of all, before we begin, let's learn about what an ambient occlusion map is. I'll just go ahead and create a box right here, and I'll go ahead, give it a gray material, and I'll go ahead and clone it, and I'll go ahead and scale this box down. Alright, here I'll click on lighting and shadows, enable hardware shading, click on it again, enable ambient occlusion. So now we can actually see ambient occlusion in action. So there's various types of lights. One type of light is a direct light, which directly shines on an object. Another type of light is an ambient light, which applies light to all objects uniformly. So the sun would be an example of a direct light, and the sky would be an example of an ambient light. Now, as objects get closer together, the area between them gets darker. So what's happening is that the ambient light is being occluded or blocked. As you can see, the closer they get, the darker this area becomes. So this area right here is occluding, blocking the ambient light. Now this effect of ambient occlusion occurs when you're rendering, also occurs in real time in video games, and so it happens by itself according to the quality of the engine. However, you can also bake an ambient occlusion map into a texture, and this can help us to create certain effects. It can also help us with adding dirt and grime to an object, because dirt and grime tends to occur most in these corners. So it's very helpful for that. So let's learn about how we can actually bake it into our low poly object. I'll go ahead and deactivate hardware shading. So this is just a dragon diagram I've been working on a while ago. I'll go ahead and hide this part for now. This red box right here is an example of how you can simplify a complex object. So you can see it's about 474,000 polygons. So the more geometry you have in your scene, the slower it will run. To increase performance, you can simply right click on an object, go into Object Properties, and activate this box right here, Display as Box. When there's a tick mark here, it will turn the whole object, no matter how complex it is, into a box. If you untick it, click on OK, it will show you the full model. So this is a sculpt. So to simplify it, I'll go ahead and display as box. And it will still render into your low poly. It's just when you have it on this box here, it increases performance. And this is my low poly object. I also have the eye right here. The eyes. So my low poly object already has a projection modifier with the two high poly objects already selected. So first of all, we'll go right here under Render Setup, and under Assign Renderer, we'll go ahead and select Mental Ray. So 3ds Max comes with two renderers by default, Mental Ray and default Scanline Renderer. When you're rendering a normal map, I recommend you use default Scanline Renderer. When you want to render an ambient occlusion map, you can just switch it over to Mental Ray Renderer. Alright. Next, we'll go ahead and press M to activate our material editor. We'll go ahead and create a new material right here. Let's make the diffuse color white. And under Maps, under Self-Illumination, we want to go ahead and select the first one here, Ambient/Reflective Occlusion. So all of these yellow maps here are only available with Mental Ray. If you use a different renderer, you will not see these yellow maps here. So click on this one right here. The sample setting determines the quality of your ambient occlusion map. The higher the samples, the less noise and higher quality your ambient occlusion map will be. So just increase it to 64, 128, 256. Higher samples would increase render time, but also increase quality. Let's go ahead and set it to 128 for now. And I'll go ahead and select both of my high poly objects and apply them. Alright. Next, let's go under Rendering, Environment. Let's make the background color white. Under Global Lighting, just set the level to 0, or simply right click right here, make it 0. This will turn off all the lighting in your scene. The only reason this is red here is because this has a red object color. Alright, I'll go ahead and select my low poly object, press 0 to activate Render to Texture, Projection Mapping enabled. I'll go ahead and add a diffuse map, for example. I'll make the size relatively low, 512 by 512, and you can set the folder and name right here. Alright, so let's go ahead and click on Render. So you will now begin rendering. I'll get back to you once it's done. Okay, the ambient occlusion map is finished, and I actually want to go ahead and save this one right here. So usually when you render out a normal map, what you're seeing right here will not be the actual normal map. However, in this case, this is the map you actually want to use, and not the one in your folder. These little red areas right here is just that the low poly did not catch the high poly. I can just go ahead to those areas here, somewhere in the teeth area, and modify the cage. So red means that it didn't quite capture the detail. So you can see in all the corners there is darkness, which is the texture showing you the areas where the ambient lighting has been occluded. So how can we use an ambient occlusion map? Here I am in the Photoshop, and this is just a basic metal texture right here. So one way you can get started when you're texturing your model is simply to take your ambient occlusion map, put it on top, and set the blending mode to multiply. We can also set it to overlay or soft light. And this is one way that you have of starting your texture. Another thing you can do with an ambient occlusion map is I can go ahead and Control A, Control C, copy it. This right here is a grime texture. It's a great way of adding dirt and grime to your texture, adding more detail. But I don't want to apply it everywhere. I want to apply it only in recessed areas, in corners, where logically would be the most dirt. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and, before that, I want to go ahead and duplicate this. And before copying, what I should do is go to Adjustments and Invert, because the white represents where the grime will be. In the mask, white represents where it will be visible, and black where it will be invisible. That's why you want to invert it first, otherwise the grime will be in the wrong areas. So go ahead and Control A, Control C to copy it, Control D to deselect. I'll go into the grime layer. I'll add a mask. Make sure the mask is the one selected. I'll go under Channels, make sure this is visible, and Control V to paste the mask into here, the layer. And I'll go ahead and actually hide this one here so it's not all red, but it will still be active. And you can see the mask is visible right here. So it's not very easy to see right now. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. But you can see that it is starting to show up here. And there are trace amounts of grime. Once again, I want to make sure I have the actual mask selected, not the actual layer. I'll go under Image, Adjustments, Levels, and I'll make the white parts brighter. And you can start to see more grime show up. You can see that once it gets much brighter, there's a lot more grime. So basically you can control this, the amount of grime, using the slider right here. You can add more grime in the edges or less. And this is an effect that works best when you use it with subtlety and not over apply it. And you combine this with the ambient occlusion map. Just a little bit of soft light here. Maybe decrease its opacity. And then apply a little bit of grime. And then you're on your way to creating your texture. So this is a very simple effect where I can go ahead and also modify the layer, the bottom layer. As you can see, the grime is a lot easier to see when we have a darker texture. When I decrease the brightness, you can see the grime really start to show up here. So I can play around with basic settings, maybe even decrease the brightness of the grime, make it darker, and just play around with the settings until I get a good result. And here I am back in 3ds Max. You can just go back on the rendering environment, set the level back to 1 so you can see what you're doing. And I can go ahead and activate flat mode so I can see this, just the texture. And as you can see, here we have just used the ambient occlusion render, inverted it, and we have used that to add some basic grime to our model. And you can see that in the areas where there's recesses, more grime has been added. That's just a very simple and quick way of rendering ambient occlusion and using it to create grime and dirt into the recessed parts of your geometry. So hopefully now you can use it to achieve some impressive results. Thank you for watching and take care.